Everyone, this is John Wagner with the Association of Equipment Manufacturers. My title is Director of Materials Management. In that role, I am involved with a lot of the regulations that impact our companies as we ship into countries, and also strive to be compliant with the regulations that are ever increasingly complex and changing. Today's webinar is going to be about Canadian regulations and an update of some of the regulations that will be changing in 2018. We've got some in-depth information about two of them and some heads up on a couple of others. So, Molly, if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide. I'm going to walk through the agenda here. Like I said, I'm giving the introduction and kind of an outline of what we're going to be talking about. We are fortunate to have with us today two representatives from Environment and Climate Change Canada, that's equivalent to the U.S. EPA, and Laura Dornan, a Senior Program Engineer with the Regulatory Administration section of the Transportation Division at the ECCC, along with Leandro Fortes, also a Senior Program Engineer with the Regulatory Administration section of the Transportation Division of the EEC, will be talking to us about the Single Window Initiative, which has to do with reporting requirements under the vehicle and emissions regulations. Following that, we will have an update on the Ontario Tire Stewardship Program changes, presented by Howard Maines, a Canada consultant on public policy for AEM. Howard is our main contact in Canada, and as such helps us stay on top of these sorts of regulations. Then we'll have a quick update on the comprehensive asbestos ban in Canada that is coming, and also a quick update on the hazardous products regulations, the product labeling and safety data sheet requirements, and that will close out. I want to let you know that this program is being recorded, and as such will be available for people to listen to on a website, and you can have other folks inside your companies if they want to view this, or if you want to go back over it, you'll have access to that. With that being said, I would like to turn it over to Laura and Leandro for their presentation.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Laura Dornan, and thank you, John, for introducing myself and my colleague, Leandro. So I will be presenting today, along with my colleague, Leandro, about the integration of the Canada Border Services Agency's Single Window Initiative with the import requirements under Environment and Climate Change Canada's Vehicle, Engine, and Vessel Emission Regulation. Leandro and I work on the regulatory administration of ECCC's Vehicle, Engine, and Vessel Emission Regulations. And today we'll be talking about the Single Window Initiative, some of the benefits of using this Single Window Initiative and what it is. We'll also be discussing briefly some of the regulatory requirements under the Vehicle, Engine, and Vessel Emission Regulations, and how some of these requirements can be met using a Single Window Initiative. So with that, I will start moving through the slides. So we could move to slide 3.
One? No.
Thank you. So the Single Window Initiative is a Canada Border Services Agency-led initiative with the aim to provide a single point of entry for electronic reporting of import information. So allow for a single electronic transmission via the Integrated Import Declaration that would satisfy import reporting requirements of multiple government departments. In other words, Environment and Climate Change Canada's reporting requirements for the importation of vehicles and the engines will be integrated with data submissions that are required by the Canada Border Services Agency and other government programs for imports. Intention of the single window initiative is to modernize and align Canadian and United States import processing procedures under the Beyond the Border Action Plan, which is a joint long-term partnership between Canada and the U.S. And this is in response to calls from industry to simplify and streamline the processes for trade at the border. So move to slide 4. Sorry, it's slide 6 on our screen. The regulations that we'll be discussing today fall under the authority of the Canadian Environmental Protection Act. It is an act respecting pollution prevention and the protection of the environment and human health. The Canadian Environmental Protection Act includes the authority to regulate emissions from on-road vehicle engines, off-road recreational vehicles and engines, as well as marine spark ignition engines and vessels with installed fuel lines or fuel tanks. Moving to the next slide. The regulations that we'll be discussing today apply to manufacturers, distributors, and importers of vehicles, engines, and vessels that are prescribed by the regulations. Also apply to persons who import for their own use. The general approach under all of these regulations has been to align with the U.S. federal emission standards. The regulations adopt consistent definitions with the U.S. regulations and incorporate by reference applicable emission standards and test procedures. That there are some differences between the regulations in Canada versus the U.S. The emission standards are performance-based with the intention to provide manufacturers the flexibility in terms of design and innovation. And generally, products that are eligible for sale in the U.S. are eligible for sale in Canada as well. So we try to align to the greatest extent possible. On to the next slide. This slide presents a schematic of the various regulations and products that are regulated under our program. On the left-hand side, we have the on-road vehicles and engines, which are covered by the on-road vehicle and emission regulations, as well as the heavy-duty vehicle and engine greenhouse gas emission regulations and passenger automobile and light truck emission regulations. Over to the right, we have the off-road small spark ignition engines. Those are small engines less than 25 horsepower. For example, lawn and garden machines, light-duty industrial machines, and logging machines. The green represents the off-road compression ignition engine. So these are the diesel engines used in mining machines, construction equipment, farming machines, etc. It also includes portable diesel generators. Last column on the right-hand side is the marine spark ignition engines, vessels, and off-road recreational vehicles. So these apply to snowmobiles, off-road motorcycles, ATVs, utility vehicles, and vessels with fuel line or fuel tanks that are installed. Moving to the next slide. This slide talks about manufacturer obligations. So we have a self-certification regime. This is different from the regime in the U.S. So under our program, regulators must demonstrate compliance with the standards in our regulations. Manufacturers, this involves applying for authorization to use the national emissions mark. Accept evidence of conformity demonstrating that an engine or a vehicle complies with the regulations. Can include EPA certificate and supporting documents. Products that are concurrently sold in Canada and the U.S. For products that are unique to Canada, so the product not concurrently sold in the U.S., we require the same or similar documentation to what the U.S. EPA would require. So the next few slides will be presented by my colleague, Leandro. Thank you.
Thanks, Laura. Moving on to slide number 8. So for importer obligations, the importer must ensure that the product is certified compliant, meaning that for vehicles and engines that are covered by EPA, by an EPA certificate and sold concurrently in Canada and US, the evidence of conformity must be submitted upon request. On the end, for vehicles and engines not covered by an EPA certificate or not sold concurrently in US and Canada, the importers must submit the evidence of conformity prior to the importation. Moving on to the next slide, slide 9. Importers must file an importation declaration to the Government of Canada that satisfies the Canadian Border Service Agencies and the Environmental Canada requirements in order to obtain the release of the goods at the border. So it means with the single window initiative, it will provide an alternate way to meet those requirements, meaning that a separate importation declaration, paper declaration, won't be necessary when you use the single window initiative. A part of the single window initiative, there's another regulatory requirements that were implemented here at our division. One of them is submit annual reports, provide evidence of conformity, maintain records, provide maintenance instructions, and when required, submit a notice of defect. Moving on to slide 10, here's a couple of compliance promotion program that some components that we have here at our program. Will be authorizing and monitoring the use of national emission mark, monitor and vehicle and engine importation, that's what we're talking about now, review company evidence of conformity, review annual reports for compliance with regards to the fleet average standards and the banking and trading emission system. As well, register company notice of defects for affecting emission controls. As well, inspect test vehicles and engines related to the emission control components. And lastly, we perform a lab emission test on a sample of new and used vehicles and engines offered for sale here in Canada. Moving on to slide 11. Here we have, I don't know if the participants will be able to open, but it's a Word document that contains the data elements and the HS codes that will be incorporated by Canadian border agencies and the brokers. So regulation, they have their own data elements. That's what that slide talks about. Moving on to slide 12, I'll describe some of other advantages. I know Laura talked about in his first slide about some of the advantage of the single window initiative, but he talked about some advantage related to our program. So one of the key advantages is that this initiative is processed by reducing the paper burden and by better integrating the importation declaration requirements for both Environment Canada and CBSA. Secondly, because with this initiative, we'll be able to receive data in real time. It will allow us to engage with stakeholders on a timely manner and as well as needed. So if we detect some errors or information that has not been provided, we can go straight away to the stakeholders and better get that information. Thirdly, and that's key for us as well, we are hoping that by completing some of the data elements some optional data fields. Will allow us to fill the annual report on the stakeholders as well. So hoping that will reduce the requirements and reduce the time that the stakeholders and us, the stakeholders need to put to fill the annual report and ask for review the annual report as well. And we're hoping as well that will remind stakeholders that information that they need to complete the annual report. So we're hoping with this initiative that the effort for the annual reports will be reduced. And lastly, I think it's important as well with this initiative, the Importation Declaration can be submitted to the CBSA 90 days prior to the arrival of goods here in Canada at the border. So the process will allow the process sometimes to file the declaration until the goods arrive at the border. Moving on to slide 13, a couple of updates about this initiative. So currently, the single window initiative is a voluntary program. Eventually, it will become mandatory, but right now it is voluntary. It means that importers can submit a paper declaration to us, and it's fine for now. And there are 10 along with the CBSA, there are 10 federal departments and agencies involved in this project, encompassing 38 programs. Our data elements have been recently incorporated by CBSA. I believe it was March of this year, so recent. And as far as we know, there are 3 brokers that have been qualified by CBSA. But I have to say they're still incorporating our data element into the software. So it's work in progress. And the 3 brokers that I remember that have been qualified are Livingstone International, Wilson International, and Omnitrans. Those are the 3 that I know that have already been qualified by CBSA. Next slide, we can move to slide 14. Here we'll talk about the next steps. In the course of the 3 last months, we have been engaging association, and your association was one of them, which with about 15 associations, just to try to find mechanisms how we can disseminate information about the single window initiative to your members. And one of the questions was how we could best send that information out. And in the discussions that we had with the association, most of the associations, there was agreed that we should develop a short one-page document. And we are currently working on that. So we did the translation, and probably in next week we'll be sending that information for review to the associations. Another option as well to disseminate that information that was told to us is to participate in trade shows, conferences, or webinars like we are doing now. So we'll be engaging the associations as well on that manner. We are always seeking other ways to explore other options as well to disseminate that information. And right now we are receiving some test data from CBSA, but we are hoping that soon we'll start to receive the real data. But the work is still in progress, I have to say. Next slide, moving to slide 15. Here we have a couple of useful links, web links. Our act at SIPA, as Laura described at the beginning of our presentation. The links for all of our regulation, on-road and off-road regulations. And the last one is the policy for enforcement and compliance that we've put together at Environment and Climate Change Canada. Moving on to the last slide, here we have our contacts here at Environment Canada, Transportation Division. and as well the contacts at the Canadian Border and Service Agencies. I have to say that on that website you can find a lot of information about the single window initiative, the technical information as well for brokers and for stakeholders, and the on telephone number as well. And with that, I finished our deck. So I'm not sure if there's any question.
Okay, but everybody's on. First of all, thank you, Leandro and Laura. That's a great update and lots of good information there. And thank you for sharing with us, and we're glad to be part of the early process of dissemination of this information. Also, we will be making available the flyer that Leandro mentioned here through the AEM website, so look for that information coming as well. So once again, thank you for bringing us up to date on the single window initiative, and we look forward to the efficiencies that it can bring us. Next up is our man Howard Maines, and Howard is going to talk to us about a tire initiative. So Howard, you're up now. On mute.
John, just to let you know that we really thank for your support and collaboration, and we'll be sending you the single window initiative bulletin shortly. Thank you much for your support.
Thank you again. Howard? Where are you?
I do not have him listed as mute.
Okay. Why don't we go ahead and go down past his, and I'll take care of the other two while we try to reestablish contact with Howard. One of the things that we wanted to bring to your attention is the comprehensive asbestos ban in Canada. Last December 15th, the Government of Canada announced a government-wide strategy to manage asbestos in Canada. And a key part of that strategy is to develop new regulations under the Canadian Environmental Protection Act, which I had mentioned earlier, to prohibit asbestos and products containing asbestos. While many of these have been phased out, asbestos can still be found in a variety of products at lower levels, but things like brake pads and clutch pads, to name some that might be used in our products. The intention is that this will be implemented in 2018. It's not quite completed yet, so we don't have all the details. But my best advice to you would be to be prepared to disclose asbestos content for products and a concentration. And as we will continue to monitor this, and as things change or we learn more about it, we will share it with our group. So next one, if you can flip over to the next slide, please. The hazardous product regulations, or HPR, for product labeling and safety data sheet requirements are changing. Changes are coming in 2018, and there's been a lot of work going on by associations similar to ours in Canada with connections into the U.S. to really try and make these as parallel to the U.S. regulations as possible. So they're really striving for an alignment between the two labeling laws. However, there are going to be some key differences, one of them being the requirement for English and French on the label and on the safety data sheets, and identification of a Canadian responsible party. So those are the main differences that we've identified right now. Again, we will continue to monitor this situation and keep you informed of the differences of what's going on with that particular item. So with that, do we have Howard on the line?
Come back in. John?
Okay, we've got you. We've got Howard.
Okay.
So you're up, Howard.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. It's Howard Mains here in Ottawa, and I want to give you a review about what is happening with regard to tire stewardship in Ontario. Let me stress a couple points here. The Government of Ontario, which is implementing new legislation, is implementing a tire stewardship program that is unique in Canada, and it comes into effect on January 1st, 2019. So while here we are, July 1st, 2017, that may seem like a lot of time, but it really isn't. And the other point that I would make is that it's unlike the other provinces, the other jurisdictions in Canada that have a retail model, this is a producer model which places a great deal of responsibility and liability on the producer. And the producer is anyone that sells a piece of equipment with a tire. Now, the critical takeaway here for the presentation this morning is that AEM members that distribute and sell equipment in Ontario, they need, or our recommendation is that they should have a business relationship established with one of the producer responsibility organizations. Next slide, please. The legislation used to be the term stewards has now been replaced by producer, and equipment manufacturers that sell a piece of equipment that has a tire, they are defined as a producer, and they are directly responsible for the diversion of tires from the waste stream and the liability that accompanies that responsibility should they fail to verify compliance. A producer can do a couple of things. One is they can take the responsibility all onto their own and take the tires, or two, they can engage with what is being called a producer responsibility organization, or PRO in short, but they cannot shift the liability that's associated with the cycle management of the tire. Now, we expect that there's going to be at least two of these new PROs established. One is being called E-Track, and it's being set up by people that are affiliated with the Tire and Rubber Association of Canada, and the other is called Tire Recovery Ontario. Tire Recovery Ontario is being set up by some entrepreneurs, one of which comes out of the equipment sector. Now, the other point is that the existing organization, which is called Ontario Tire Stewardship, ceases operation on December 31st, 2018, and then on January 1st of 2019, the new PROs come into place. And as I said earlier, equipment manufacturers will want to have a business relationship established with one of the PROs. Next, please. I don't intend to get into the detail that's on this slide, but the existing Ontario Stewardship Program, which ends on December 31st, 2018, carry out a number of functions. You can just a sense of what those functions are, but just taking a look at the numbers, as you can see, there's about 670 stewards. That ranges from the Michelin's, Goodyear's, Firestones, Bridgestones, Pirellis, right through to the equipment manufacturers, the car manufacturers. They're all now called producers. Obviously, some have a greater role than others in terms of the entire waste stream that's created, but it's important to understand that it's a producer is a broadly defined term. Now, the other issue, the other mandates of the the existing tire stewardship program you can see there. And it's about a $60 million a year business. And so one would, if there's two new pros get established, those two new organizations will be competing for that $6 million business. Next, please. The government has mandated that the Ontario Tire Stewardship Organization put a wind-up plan in place. Some of us from AEM have been on a call with OTS as it's discussed what the wind-up plan may look like. There will be either a deficit associated with it or a surplus associated with the wind-up. We don't know what that is, but we just draw to your attention that that possibility exists and that the government will approve the final plan in the first quarter of 2018. And the organization, Ontario Tire Stewardship, must be wound up by December 31st of next year. Right then. This slide, which came from Tire Recovery Ontario, gives you a sense of what the current situation is right now. So you have the tire supply, which is generated through about 670 stewards. It's all looked after through a monopoly organization called Ontario Tire Stewardship, and that organization looks after the collectors, the haulers, and the processors, and make sure that logistics chain works relatively efficiently. In the future, the new system will consist of 2 or 3 producer responsibility organizations. We know of 2, which we'll give you the contact information for, and there may be a possibility of a 3rd, but those 2 or 3 pro will come into play, and they will be competing for your business. And so what we have done is we've spoken with each one of them, and we will give you their contact information at the end of this presentation. Next slide, please. Now, just a sense of the timelines that are associated with it. As I said, we are just at the end of quarter 2 in 2017. You can see the arrow there. And the other critical date is on January 1st, 2019. And there's a lot that has to happen between now and then. There will be final regulations developed, and AEM will be participating in a meeting in Toronto on the 24th of July, where those draft regulations will be presented. But aside from that, though, the two pros that we know of, they'll be drawing up their business plans and will be reaching out to potential customers. And they will need to enter into a commercial arrangement with each producer of tires. So that timeline gives you a sense of where we are today and everything that has to happen over the course of the next 18 months. The important thing is that, as one might think that 18 months is a fairly long period of time, but all of us know that getting contracts in place and agreements drawn up does take time. So we would urge you to not waste any time on this. Next slide, please. So as I said, AEM has been approached by 2 of these producer responsibility organizations. The first is ETRAC. The TRAC, the TRAC in that name stands for the Tire and Rubber Association of Canada, and this is an offshoot of that. The Tire and Rubber Association of Canada is the trade association that represents the Michelin's, Goodyear's, Firestones, Bridgestones, Pirelli, and all other manufacturers. And Mr. Clark, his name and phone number is there, along with his email address. So I'll just allow people to take down that information. The other group that has been formed, the contact person there is Maurice Shiner. We have spoken with him. His phone number, again, you can get there. And his group is made up, Mr. Shiner comes out of an equipment company. He became very interested in this because I think he was in skid steers or some type of equipment that actually used a rubber tire, but not a pneumatic rubber tire, a solid rubber tire. And he became very interested given what the old regulations were doing to his company. So he's set up business with some people that are experienced in setting up these types of companies. One of them comes out of the insurance industry who set up a similar industry-wide group. So these are two new groups that are coming together, that are being formed, and we have not heard of any others. I do know that Mr. Shiner spoke with the automotive manufacturers, the global automotive manufacturers last week, and I don't know who all Mr. Clark has spoken to. So those are the two organizations, and we would urge you to reach out to both of them to hear their story. So that is the conclusion of my presentation.
So thank you, Howard. So that pretty much concludes our presentation for today. Again, thank you to Howard Maines and to Laura Dornan and Leandro for their presentations. This presentation will be available on the AEM website. We'll be sending out the link to that location to everyone that we had invited to this program or has signed up for it. And so thank you all for your time today, and we hope that it's been beneficial to you as you look towards meeting your compliance requirements for Canada. Thank you. Have a good day.